Well, welcome everybody. We are here for a year-end review, CISO Talk special episode, looking at 2023 and maybe the interesting and maybe the wild and wacky, or things that really kind of struck us. Didn't like that, love that, etc. We'll find out. This is just going to go where it goes. This is not scripted. We're just going to have kind of a freewheeling road trip, looking back in the rearview mirror. So, JJ, always good to be doing this with you.
Yes. It's fantastic. Sorry. You guys, we have so much fun when we record stuff, and we try to be serious before we come on, but it doesn't actually work that way. So hi.
Welcome. So introduce our guests, if you will, JJ.
All right. Sitting in the blue corner, we have Mr. Dan Glass. And opposite. Now that makes it sound like you two are fighting. It's definitely not a fight here, but it is fun to watch you two in action together. It's been several years. Allison Miller, of course.
Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Great to have you. So Dan, I know you're charged with a few things you want to talk about. So let's have you kick things off. 2023.
I have nothing. A blank slate at this point. Jody's going to shoot me from wherever she is. No. So, starting off, I think when I think of 2023, I think of generative AI, right? It started late last year, about a year ago. But really this year is where the businesses start to wrap their arms around it, and starting to push these use cases. The way I see it from a security perspective is if crypto and cloud had a baby, it would be generative AI, because you got you've got the hype of crypto, but you've also got some of the utility of cloud. And I see it ending up about the same as cloud is sort of a detente. Like from a cloud perspective, yes, we've gotten rid of data centers, but we've replaced all that cost with cloud costs, because cloud ain't cheap, whether it's SaaS, PaaS, or IaaS. So I'll pause to let Allison correct me how wrong I am on everything.
No, not at all. I think that's a good take. It's just that you forgot like the soap opera level drama of social media sort of in that mix, along with the hype of crypto and the promise of cloud. It really did crowd out all other conversations that I feel like folks wanted to have. We're making advancements from a technology perspective on a number of fronts, a lot of things happening with the economy, but every single conversation either started or ended talking about generative AI for me this year.
Just being a perfect example, starting with generative AI. Another word that kind of goes with that for me, Dan, is Copilot. Everybody's got a Copilot. Now we've got, it isn't just bots or what chat bots or whatever. It's every product is introducing Gen AI, and Gen AI as a Copilot kind of assistant to their product. So I'm not sure what the next evolution is, but pretty soon I'll have my Copilot talk to
I don't know.
Copilot
Immediately
solve it.
You said that word.
You made Dan twitchy.
Yeah.
Oh, that's what hit a nerve there.
Well, probably gonna get in trouble for this, but I'm gonna do it anyway. All right. So the way, so Copilot is an interesting thing that Microsoft has put together. I think their all-in approach is bold. I'll say that. But what I'm amused by is that they're still in they've sort of launched it, and they launched it without really understanding, I think, how to A, sell it, and B, how to market it, because they've already changed the name like a few times, at least on us corporate guys. So we're chasing at first, Bing Enterprise, and now it's Copilot. I'm so confused by their SKUs and what they're trying to actually do. So I think Microsoft, first of all, needs to pick a name and stick with it. It seems like it's Copilot. I hope it is. But then also understand why guys like me get nervous when they say things like, "Oh yeah, no, it's no problem. We'll just use SharePoint as your enterprise knowledge repository." And there's a lot of stuff in there. So that that can bring up another thing that'll probably be what we talk about in 2024, which is data hygiene.
Mm-hmm. Hey Dan, can I jump in? Can we bump down the requirement for naming from A and replace that with something that works? Because the little bit of anecdata I've seen from friends using Copilot in larger organizations that are piloting is that it like completely destroys the file that you're operating in to the point that you can't even save the file, save as the file, manipulate the file, or even copy pieces of the file sometimes out into another file, that it is not baked, and it is what's before bleeding edge. Like there's got to be something that's just like a complete mangled mess. That's what it feels like still.
Absolutely.
Robot on a rampage.
I think it's chaos theory.
Texas, AI chainsaw massacre. I don't know.
Yeah,
I had not heard that about Copilot.
and I do, but in all seriousness, I mean, I think there is some risk here because generative AI is not perfect, and hallucinations are real. Adversarial prompting is real. Prompt injection is real. And I'm not saying Microsoft hasn't thought about these things, but I don't think there's good answers for any of it. Bias is real, and and the technology hasn't caught up yet, right? I'm going to need, I believe, a generative AI tool or an AI-backed tool to counter the risks posed by AI and generative AI. And those tools don't really exist yet, not in a way, shape, or form that I want to invest in, right? Because if I just use it as the native tool, like how does that even work? And do I got to go now hire a bunch of prompt engineers in security? Is that money well spent? I don't even know at this point. So yeah, I think Microsoft isn't really doing enterprises a lot of favors by pushing this out as quickly as they are.
Well, Dan, you're kind of giving me a flashback back to 2022. That sounds really weird to say. But anyway, I sort of forgotten what I had been thinking about a lot in 2022, and that was data governance and IAM. And I feel like these are things that are like all that's old is new again. It's an evergreen problem. No one actually ever nails it down. And with cloud and with some of the cool data technologies that have been introduced in the past 5 to 10 years, folks are sort of rewriting the rules and the complexity of folks' data stacks and their need to like manage access across all of these systems and stacks is just ever increasing. And so in a lot of ways, what the problem set that we're seeing with generative AI, it might have been a little more tolerable if we'd had things already solved on what seems like a simpler problem, which is like basic data governance. So it was really kind of like adding fire to a slow burn, a slow burn. IAM and data governance, those are slow burn problems, but they're problems that, desperately need attention in most enterprises, and just trying to add in something, sparkling and new like Gen AI on top of that. Definitely most folks aren't in a position to be successful there.
I'm thinking about data governance and management in the context of training data going into LLMs, right? This is a whole new use, and your IP is in that, and your hacker's better off stealing your LLM instead of your database, right? Because maybe it's trained in unique, interesting ways, has information that you can't get anywhere else. But how do you manage the flow of how those AI systems get updated as part of or in synchronous or not with your software cycles, your security plans, all of that? A lot more questions than answers, I think, introduced by 2023.
Ironic.
Yeah. The year of the more questions, please.
Yeah.
I think Allison nailed it, though. We haven't finished blocking and tackling from a security, or most enterprises. I'm sure there's people out there that'll raise their hand and say we absolutely have all that nailed, and some companies may, and some companies are doing zero trust well, and good for them. But I think if you're going to pull the market, I think most companies are probably very immature. Security is usually running to catch up. It's a lot of bolt-on stuff, and that's expensive. When, as Allison was alluding to, it's a lot. It would be time-consuming and a little cost-prohibitive in the beginning to do some of that data governance and data cleanup and maintenance and get that rhythm going. But in the long term, you're probably going to save money on security, especially because you're reducing your risk, right? If the data doesn't exist anymore because you cleaned it up and you're sure about who has access to it, you've plugged a lot of holes just by doing some boring stuff. But unfortunately, It is boring. It doesn't drive revenue for our friends in vendor land. And so that's kind of a cheap shot, I guess. But at the same time, those are real problems that, they always say, what problems are CISOs facing? And we're like, yeah, well, we're still having trouble like getting IT to patch. And you're coming here with this, this great way of doing this, really corner case security issue, right? For, to reduce risk. And it's like, yeah, but I got this other thing. Hey, help me there. So.
Great. Allison, anything you want to throw on another log on the fire of 2023 as we're looking back and warming up going to 2024?
Well, I'll just sort of, so my work has taken me, I still work on enterprise cybersecurity issues, like CISOs do, but I have also been spending a lot of time recently looking at what I would call sort of advanced product security issues, things that are happening in the product that folks are offering. And sometimes that shows up as like anti-fraud, anti-spam, anti-abuse. And I think what's really interesting is, so having kind of worked in that space for a while, most platforms, and like these are things that affect pretty much any consumer facing platforms. Like if you have a login button or a checkout flow, you're dealing with some of these some of these issues in your product. Even if the product is working as intended, these problems tend to show up on your doorstep. And it's interesting to see cybersecurity vendors who have classically been focused on selling into the enterprise now sort of picking up some material or trying to help out in the product. It's really just kind of interesting watching some of that convergence. So one of the things that has been a problem for many years for anyone with a login button is account hijacking, right? Like phishing happens, and what happens? Someone's credentials get stolen and their account gets hijacked. So we've known about account hijacking for a long time, and a lot of companies have built their own tools. They've added things into authentication. They have their own sort of detection technologies. And if you're a consumer of any technology, you're sort of experienced with what 2FA looks like and recovery codes and all of those things. But now we see enterprise cybersecurity vendors who are experts in authentication leaning into, well, I can help you not just with getting your employees to log in to your internal systems, but also help your customers logging in to your platform. And we've seen some detection vendors that maybe they were selling device ID for some reason, sort of shifting over into, well, maybe you could use this in your product to notice that bad actors are coming back or bots are coming at you or what have you. And so it's been really interesting for me to sort of see the entry into a niche, I guess, of vendors who'd been typically sort of selling into corporate IT. It's just fun too, because it's where this side, where the consumers live, or where things like scams and e-crime live. So it's kind of a fun place to hang out, and it's interesting to then see those names that we know and love, we're working with to secure our enterprises, also show up and offer to help out in these more fun places.
I'm wrapping my head around this. And trying to regurgitate this back to you without using any vendor names, because I don't even know who's doing this in this space.
Right.
But let me ask this: would these types of solutions, if this is successful and goes down a good path, would they help protect against some of the consumer-facing issues we've had? Like recently, 23andMe had an issue, but it was credential stuffing by users who had poor password hygiene, not something that, 23andMe had control over. Is that right, where you see this kind of playing and using those analytics and intelligence on the consumer?
Yeah, I mean, even so I feel like credential stuffing, that's like an authentication sort of expert kind of way of describing the problem. The result is an account hijacking or a compromised account. And so there are folks who are looking to, hey, notice that, and that there are bots coming to your API. Maybe they're coming to your API because they want to bid on Taylor Swift tickets, or like jam up the queues so that no one else can get Taylor Swift tickets. Or maybe they are trying to take over your accounts and in order to pull information out. So yes, what we're talking about is vendors who have been working on other use cases, now working on use cases that are consumer facing, or customer facing. It could be a business, doesn't have to be a consumer, but customer facing, customer affecting.
Yeah.
And sometimes those use cases are like owned by the security team, but sometimes they're owned by a product team, right? Mm-hmm. That has their own way of thinking about business objectives and such. So it's a really interesting bridge set of use cases for getting these teams talking to each other too.
That's interesting, because when I saw that, and it's easy to go, okay, well, that wasn't their fault. But wouldn't you notice that many user accounts being accessed at the same time, and some pattern, right? There's some pattern that's off of baseline from that. I saw Dan raising his hand, so I don't know if that was I'm trying to buy Taylor Swift tickets, or I have something to say.
Allison has a line on how to get Taylor Swift tickets, then she needs to pop me a note.
Yes. Well, I think, there's.
So, but no, from an enterprise perspective, JJ, you're touching on something so we depend on our vendors, our partners, for a lot of our security apparatus. And so, yes, we absolutely have set some stuff up. Like, I know that I have my team set things up so to monitor for, too many logins from the same IP, or too many of the same, or more than one IP logging in as a person, right? Both use cases, impossible travel, things like that. But we also rely. Let's say you're a Microsoft partner, you don't get insight a lot of the times, or you have to pay for advanced logging and things like that in order to get access to the fact that maybe you're being password sprayed, where they'll which is sort of the inverse of credential stuffing, right? Where they'll send a password with a bunch of user IDs instead of a user ID with a bunch of passwords, right? But we need to be alerted about that, right? And in some cases, because of that separation between if the product people don't think enterprise, they just build the product. Now there's that lagging indicator, right? And this goes beyond just AAA. For enterprise security, buying a security product, this would go for almost any any platform where you don't have SSO in place, where it's not an SSO login. It may be just a standalone login for something that maybe you're doing some sort of LDAP push or whatever. Same idea, right? We need to know, and sometimes the enterprise security just isn't on top of it.
Right. And JJ, someone definitely will notice if someone's looking. If someone's looking, and when they pushed the change into production, they made a decision to log certain types of information. And so there's sort of a, I think, when Dan says the product folks need to be thinking enterprise, I think that is true. But there's a mindset thing there that doesn't necessarily come naturally. It needs to be something that is sort of developed in an organization. And, I think we're past the point where every product was an MVP, where like now we have apps that have been around for 10 years. They've had folks who've been working on their security and such. But there was a time when, there was an app for everything and everyone was just putting their information in. And a lot of these folks, they didn't have time to develop some of the, I shouldn't say they didn't have time. They did not take the time to develop past this app works into this app works, is effective, safe, I can troubleshoot it. It doesn't even have to be a security issue. A lot of things, you need to log that data and be looking at it to keep the app or the system up, to keep it on. So I think that we're moving to a point where that's becoming clearer. And, we have a lot of great platforms that have been investing in this stuff for years, and have security best practices wired into how they develop, products, not just from an application security perspective, but like how the products work and what the user experience is with the security issues. And that's kind of new.
I love to hear it. So, hearing you makes me hopeful for the future. True. I mean, it needs to be table stakes for some of these apps, right? And not just for enterprise. I use apps personally, and I would not like my stuff stolen there either. I think better security, just making security more of a functional requirement and less of a non-functional requirement, because non-functional requirements, I think, Allison, you were getting at, is they sort of fall to the floor, right? Ship the feature, right?
Right. So is that an intention that we're going to set for 2024? We're going to manifest this better product security for consumers, better security experiences. Just like
security becomes a feature.
I'm visualizing it in my head. So hopefully we can make it so in 2024. We should get back together at the end of 2024.
Put it on your vision board, everybody. Just put it on there.
Put it on the vision board for sure.
So kind of shifting topics a little bit, JJ, something we've talked over and over different times is the evolving role of the CISO, what folks on our panel are doing. And, I think there was a great disturbance in the force when Tim Brown got charged by the SEC for the things happening at SolarWind, and you can examine all the reasons why. But, Dan, have heard from you, probably Allison, same for you. What, JJ, I'd love you first to comment on what you think the impact of that potential risk or outcome for CISOs, like going to jail kind of thing, or being heavily fined. What's that going to do? Is anybody going to want to be a CISO anymore?
Well, it's funny and timely, I guess, to have the conversation. I mean, I think also people, like anybody listening, if you haven't taken the time to understand the nuances and the difference between this and some of the stuff that happened before, where people were abusing bug bounty programs, intentionally hiding breaches and doing some shady stuff, right? That other stuff is not appropriate. And we're not saying that's okay, but this happening with the SEC, where they're basically punishing the CISO who has no authority on execution at a certain level up the organization. It's timely. I mean, I hate it, but it's timely because we just had this conversation with Andy Ellis before this happened, when we were kind of talking about the conversation of the CISO who's in the room, who's invited to the boardroom. What does that composition look like of those executive leaderships? And I think he was pretty blunt about, the role of the CISO and how they are treated by those stakeholders, and that they're not always invited to the table. And then sometimes if you are invited in, you still might get told what you are and are not reporting, and your report might be filtered before it gets up the chain. And so, I mean, it's a pretty shitty place to be as a CISO. It's one of the, it's one of the many reasons looking into that life that I don't do that work as a CISO full time, because there's pieces of CISO-y stuff that I like. So I like advising CISOs and doing the parts that I do well, and then leaving the crap of the things that I don't do well and this stuff to other people. But I think the fallout from this is there are a lot of professionals who are doing a great job that, don't get paid enough to deal with this kind of risk. They're not protected by the corporate policies. If they don't have that type of cover from those stakeholders and leadership, they're just screwed. So we're going to lose good people. You're going to get the wrong people into those roles. And I don't mean like a blanket statement 100%, but it's going to be hard to recruit into these when the CISO is not given the authority that's in alignment with the responsibility that they have.
No, I think obviously some of the recent cases, and we have a couple now where CISO is called out. It's definitely making a little folks jumpy, because what's your risk tolerance? And I think that a lot of folks who end up in a CISO seat, they're great at security. They're not necessarily prepared for how their role changes when they get the C. So, and the thing is that there is nothing magical or protective about the C. You can be a CISO, that can be your official title, and you could still be not part of the C-suite. You could not be covered by D&O insurance. And these are things that we as professionals don't necessarily have practice when we are, I'll speak for myself. When I land a job that I'm really excited about, I'm just so excited. I'm so excited that we picked each other, And so then when it comes to negotiating, now I feel like I need to have an attorney run things through. I need to make sure that there's appropriate insurance in place. And if I was VP of product, I don't need to like pony up that level. It's just a sort of more of a compensation and scope negotiation. These elements aren't part of that negotiation. And if you're a VP of security and you're sort of considered the exec and the buck's going to stop with you, then you do need to be thinking about those things. And most of us just simply haven't been prepared by our careers for that. The other thing that I think is a shock to most people is folks who become CISOs are very effective doers. They may have a strategic mindset, vision, the communication skills, and all of that. But we got where we got, and a lot of us sort of get personal esteem out of our ability to execute and our tech chops, right? Like whatever your expertise is. And some of folks are like the risk nerds, and some of us are, the networking gurus, et cetera. But like, the role really changes. When you are an executive, that's your primary job, to be an executive, to advocate for your budget and to like work with legal and work with HR in a very different way than, what's the phrase? Like how, the way that you got here isn't how you're going to get where you're going, kind of a thing. Like,
yeah. How you got here won't get you there.
Yes. And so I just, I feel like the individual situations that we have as examples, there's some lessons to be learned. Do this, don't do that. But I think especially as what I'm seeing is that the role of the CISO is actually becoming more fluid, not less. Like a CISO who also runs IT, or a CISO who also runs fraud or trust and safety. Like it's not a predictable scope. And yet I feel like some of the expectations coming on to us are a little bit fixed and rigid. And so I just hope for us as a community that we can kind of start to figure out amongst ourselves what the reasonable expectations are and figure out how to advocate for ourselves to get the scope, the budget, the legal protection that we need. So for example, all of you folks who are about to be offered a CISO gig, like you may need your own independent professional liability insurance. You cannot depend on the company to even know what to do as far as getting you covered with D&O insurance. So that is my 2.5 cents.
All right, baby face, what you got?
Nothing. She covered all my points. Damn it. No, but no, it's true. Like if you are an existing chief information security officer or thereabouts, right, from a title perspective, and you don't have D&O insurance, get it. Go and go to your board. If your like leadership says no, then let the board know that you're not covered. And if the board says no, then go look for a new job. Go find another company because you're exactly the type of person that they're probably going to try to throw under a bus. We are, I think, so I'm of a split mind here. On one hand, I do understand what the SEC is attempting to do by doing this, right? They're trying to say that the CISO is a director or officer, right? We are a material person in the company. What our decisions should matter. But I think they're going out it the wrong way by going after the person who was in a position of having to make those hard choices as a CISO about, your leader tells you, I don't want to hear that. And it's like, well, okay, but I need to go to the board. No, you're absolutely not going to take that to the board. Now, I'm not saying that happened in this case. I'm just saying that it can happen. And then the pressure that you're under, right? Because you want to keep your job, your professional integrity. And now, do you want to be subject to a potential indictment, right? Or be sued? So I think not just the D&O insurance, but I think this is going to be a maturity point for the CISO, as Allison was getting at before. We have gone through maturity cycles where the CISO was usually the smart geek in the room that just knew how to run the firewall and some antivirus, and so they got the hat, and then it transformed into a pseudo risk leader, but still kept at a managerial type level and not a true executive, and so no real decision making authority, but they got a cool title. And now I think what the SEC is attempting to do is lift this position up to being a direct of the CEO in almost every this needs to be sitting as a peer to the CIO. If the CISO is reporting to the CIO, now you have a conflict of interest inherent into the position, and your insurance carrier may not want to cover you because of that position, right? Those are things I'm going to start challenging insurance carriers when I meet with underwriters about, like, how are you guys thinking about this? Because I know that if I were covering the CISO, I would want that person to have the loudest voice with the most direct line to the board as possible. Otherwise, SolarWinds is going to keep happening. I'm not knocking what happened there. Like I said, I could completely put myself in those shoes. Like, we've all been there. Anybody who's sat in the chair knows the pressure that you're under, not just from the bad guys. In fact, I often joke saying, I prefer that. I enjoy when things are hitting the fan from a security perspective. That's like Allison said, that's my natural operating environment, right? The more chaotic and messy, the more I'm digging in and geeking out and thriving on the adrenaline. But yeah, the managerial pressure, the leadership pressure, and the pressure from the other executives to just get out of the way, right? Why are you stopping this? It's intense, and it takes an iron backbone. It really does.
So maybe there is an upside to this, which is it will help. And I, frankly, hadn't even thought about that it will help restructure and elevate that role a little bit. I am so mesmerized by the spinny things behind you, Dan. Sorry, if you guys watch my eyes gloss over here, I've got sucked into the portal.
All hypnotized now. Okay, last topic. I think you have, JJ. We have just a few minutes left.
Oh.
If you want to bring up, I think we were talking about some bad guys getting better.
Oh, me?
Yeah. You want to bring that topic to the front here?
Yeah. I'm curious, and I'll start with Dan on this one, but I think we've, for, I don't know, forever, we're still doing the 101 level stuff poorly. From a hygiene and security perspective. But it does seem that looking back throughout this year, we've had a lot of more sophisticated attacks where it wasn't just, now there were opportunities for us to thwart, but we would have had to, we had to, do that thing where we got a bunch of stuff right. And the attacker, instead of only getting right once, they actually had to jump through and get several things right. So it feels more sophisticated. So I'm curious your thoughts on that from where you sit.
Absolutely. And so the bad guys, and I'm going to use that term generically, but, organized criminal actor groups, if you go listen to the FBI, or I can't remember what they call them.
Organized criminal actor groups.
Yeah, I just made that up. Isn't that cool?
Okay.
Hold on, I need to trademark that one too. I got a lot of stuff.
OCAGs. OCAGs?
So they are. I think that what we're seeing now is convergence of technical expertise and the profit motive sort of mixing. Whereas before it was, you throw a fish out and you get lucky once in a while. And then we got better fish protection. And then we got, the firewalls and next gen. And we have satisfied most of the low level stuff, right? So all that was left is APT level attacks for a large enterprise that's investing in security, obviously. And so now what we've seen is that some of these criminal groups that are just purely motivated by profit, taking APT-like capability, right? So they know how your infrastructure works. They know how to manage a firewall or a proxy. They know how to manipulate Active Directory. They know they know your infrastructure maybe better than you do. And that is a scary thought, right? And they're also not afraid to use non-traditional attack methods, right? Getting back to, they're calling people up on the phone and impersonating somebody or just threatening them, right? Saying, and ransomware, right? Let's not forget ransomware, and just purely for profit. I know nothing about this situation from the inside. I know nothing about their security capabilities, but I look at Bally's and I feel horrible for whoever was in seat on those days. And I'm sure they're still cleaning up. Right, because I'm sure that they had a good program. I mean, it's Bally's, right? I'm assuming that they had some investment there, right? Casinos take security pretty seriously, and still, the bad things that can happen, right? And that was a warning shot for, once again, that perked me up when I saw that and how devastating, because they didn't care. They just went after them and they set a ransom and they didn't pay the ransom, and like I said, I feel horrible. Like it's like one of those nightmare scenarios. It's like, we did the right thing. We didn't pay the ransom. And now I just, our company is offline for 3 months and we have no way of recouping some of the data because the backups failed or they timed out or whatever. And the bad guys are getting that good now. And it's, once again, getting back to that last one about DNO and all the rest of it, right? Even though we do everything right, sometimes bad things happen. And will the SEC care? I don't know. Maybe. Now I'm depressed.
So I think that's that, and the example you used was interesting because I think so I've spent a lot of my career dealing with actors who are primarily financially motivated. Like there's APTs out there too, state sponsored, all of that, but they're a little bit predictable. They're going after the money and they'll take the easiest route to go there. And so part of what I'm kind of rolling around in my head is these folks have always had they've been very clever and have supply chains. I'm thinking back to the days of call shops, which probably doesn't resonate in the US, but in Europe and Latin America, when long distance calling was very expensive, there were folks who would figure out how to hack phone systems and get free time on the phone. And then there would be a line, you'd be in Brooklyn and there would be a line at a payphone with people waiting to, pay cheap rates to call internationally and or out the door of a tabac in some in France or something. And so there were deep supply chains associated with these. And I kind of wonder if sort of a combination of the success of ransomware plus the pandemic, because the sort of crime evolved in really interesting ways during the pandemic, both because everybody is at home and remote, and also, jobs were scarce. So I think in the U.S. and maybe Canada, I'm not sure where else check fraud is exploding, but part of what folks are sort of blaming that on is it was just a great way to commit fraud, and all it required was hacking U.S. Postal or what have you, pulling things out of people's mailboxes, which is very old school, but now figuring out how to break into mailboxes that had multiple tenants associated with it. It feels like very low level crime, but the impact has been really big and difficult to get arms around. And so because you're talking about ransomware, and one of the things I was thinking is, one of the things I loved about crypto is that there were ways to trace people through the cryptocurrencies and take action. And but I think that folks are really there's innovators who are highly financially motivated, and they're going to figure out how to get their money out. So I think we'll continue to see that. because it's kind of a shame that checks being stolen out of the mail is like a lowest common denominator, but in other situations, hacking a hospitality firm might be the easiest way to get to all of that money. So it's just interesting because they will go wherever it's easiest for them to go.
I think that actually you're touching on exactly the point I was making. So they used to go after a company, you work for a company that had a lot of money sitting in virtual currency and that they would go after. And I work for a company that had a lot of virtual currency as well. And so we were obviously very tuned to those things. What I'm getting at is like the Bally's thing. Yeah, they have a ton of money, but that's not what they went after. They just went after the infrastructure, right?
They didn't go after the credit cards. That data might be tokenized at this point, useless to them. So what did they go after? Yep. Extortion.
Right. So my question for you guys, because I don't think I'm calling this the year view mirror session, but I don't think we can look back at this year and not talk about zero trust. So in the quick, one word, zero trust in the past year, is it hot or hype? Allison, start with you.
I'm sorry. I know you want a one-word answer, but I decline to respond if forced to one word. I honestly have to say, I haven't heard that many discussions about zero trust this year in the sense that I think the hypiness of zero trust is maybe 2 or 3 years old, right? It was very hypey a few years ago, but now I think it's just folks are, they're on their roadmap. They're adopting the principles they can at the pace that they can, and so they're still shooting for the promise of zero trust. But I think in their implementations, they are wherever they are. So I think it's not so hot. It's not hot or hype. It's just happening. Oh. I got another word for you.
That's about 100 one-word answers, so that was really good.
So I will follow the rules and say hot. Only, but in reality, I agree with Ali a lot because it's a journey. A, but B, it's an architecture, right? So getting those zero trust principles in place as an architecture and then putting tooling behind it is really what zero trust should have been about the whole time. But it turned into just, hey, we're selling zero trust. It's like, no, it's like saying, I'll use DLP as another example of yet another term that was an architecture, but turned into a product that then didn't work the way anybody thought it did, because of course it can't. So anyway.
Thanks for that. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much. Mitch, I know we were right at time there, but let's see what happens in 2024.
We could have taken the rest of 2023 wrapping it up, but thanks to all of you, Allison and Dan, of course, JJ. It's been a pleasure working with you in 2023 on CISO Talk. So thanks to everybody who joined us. Thanks to all of our panel and my partner, JJ. And we look forward to seeing you in 2024. Let's hope some of these things we're going to deal with, or maybe not, and work on the next thing that's more important. So we'll see what happens. Thanks for joining us on CISO Talk. We'll look forward to seeing you again in 2024 on the next episode. Bye, everybody.